Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I am Duffy Duck here once again, and I'm back for some more yet again for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Yoshi's Woolly World for the Nintendo Wii U / Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World for the Nintendo 3DS. So, last time we have managed to able to actually done with every single levels in World 6, despite the fact that we've only done just only 2 of those stages, which there are the last Bowser Castle level, and especially noticeable with the actual, the 6th special stage. So yeah, today for this episode is the fact that we're going to be continuing things on, and originally we were going to go into the forms of the final stage, or the true final stage in the whole entire game, which is of course World Star-S, but we'll save that until eventually in this first stage. So either way, today for this episode is the fact, as I said this before, we are about to be going to be taking on the forms of the boss tents. Now, if you're probably wondering that this is going to be a the post commentary for this point, because, well, I'll point things out whenever we're able to actually get this thing started though, so even then, let's hop into the forms of the boss tent really quickly. Because of this though, that'll be today's focus of this video, but until, you know, this first day in particular, we'll go ahead and just deal with the true final level in the whole game, and hopefully we'll collect the rest of the collectibles on that level. So, the bosses you defeated on your adventure are back and stronger than ever. Win the right to challenge to the next boss. So, yeah, this is how the boss tent looks like. You go through a serious amount of bosses again, except the fact that there's going to be a lot more tougher and aggressive, which either way, well, we're mostly able to point things out whenever we get this thing started though, so I think that we need to face off against with 12 bosses in that particular mode. So, and to kick things off, we're about to begin with the forms of Big Montigollier, round 1, so even then know that this might be a relatively easy boss fight, but it only took me about 1 attempt for this boss fight though, because, well, to be expected that this is the first boss in the game, of course. Well, I would say the first mid-boss in the game, so basically you just have to, like, step on his head, and then as soon as he gets tripped up and just gets stuck onto the ground, well, basically that's how you deal the damage on him. So, but the difference is this time around though, is that as you can see on certain boss fights that we might actually come across in too, most boss fights do move a lot more faster, and to top it all off, I believe those attacks might be slightly exactly the same speed, but the majority of the boss fights might actually move a lot more faster, so makes things a little bit tougher for you, for those of you who've ever come across into this particular point of the game. In fact, whenever I manage to play as on the 3DS version, I seriously can't stand for the forms of the last boss, which either way, we'll point things out whenever we get into that specific point. So yeah, there goes the actual, the first boss here, and now let's move on to Bert the Bashful right here. And every time you're able to actually kill those bosses, well, basically you would able to reward yourself. As you can see, we actually collect one of those yarn pieces, which every time you actually get into the next 4 bosses, well, to be more specifically, the 3 bosses in a row, you actually get yourselves just only 1 piece of your yarn pieces. But until World 4 and World 2, well, I should say World 2 and World 4, and the final boss until at the very end, that we actually get ourselves 2 pieces of yarn. So, it's one point things out right away, just for the sake of clarity here. So either way, there's not much else to really say about this here. So either way, oh wow, I just got stuck. Come on! Okay, I think that works just fine. Oh, really? Ah, I just got hit by that shy guy at the very end. I think that's probably my fault, but either way though, I just want to point things out right away. So, anyways though, anyway, for this particular boss, it might actually took me about 2 attempts if you couldn't tell for this point, because, well, the trouble is about this particular boss fight now and then is going to get a lot more tougher and aggressive, which is very understandable, because either way though, it kind of reminds me of that particular, the organization data fights from the likes of Kingdom Hearts 2, except the fact that we don't usually do hack and slash kind of gameplay or anything like that, so instead, well, you're basically just gonna gobble up some of these parts of the boss. So, there we go. There goes Bert the Bashful. I think we might actually bump towards him until, you know, Yoshi's Crafted World. So either way, hopefully we'll see him again. So either way, though, I just want to point things out. So, not much else to really talk about this at this point today, folks, honestly, because either way, there's not much else to really say, apart from the fact that, well, today's day is the forms of, the 15th of October today, so hopefully, relatively speaking of such, as I mentioned as I mentioned to you guys before, hopefully we can able to actually finish this Let's Play up at some point at the very end of this month, which, that'll be 100% guaranteed that will happen, because either way, we're probably gonna able to actually just to show off some extra bits as well as the final stage in the whole entire game. And after that, well, we're gonna be moving on to the Poochie and Yoshi's Woody World's exclusive features. To be more specifically, the forms of these Poochie levels, and especially noticeable for all 31 of those short movies, which might take a while to able to actually unlock them all, but hopefully we can able to actually unlock them just in time before October just ended. So, because relatively speaking, that we're actually on the halfway point of October already. So, there we go, that's not Wing To Koopa, which is essentially the first round, because, well, normally if you can tell, every time you actually come across into those exactly the same mid-bosses as you remember from before, but even then, it does say rounds 1, 2, and 3 and vice versa between these two mid-bosses, but the only time exception is, of course, the actual main bosses themselves, because, well, you face off with them with, well, just only one time, so either way. Now let's move on to Bunsen, the hot dog right here. And I think this one makes boss fights a little bit trickier, but it's not too nearly as difficult, I think. Well, up until when we get to the forms of World 4 boss fight, and once again, I'm purposely stuck, so that's no good. Especially noticeable, I've only got a little bit of health left, so in this case, 1 unit of health. Now, obviously, another noticeable difference is the fact that, as you can tell, we start the actual boss rematch encounters for about, let's just say, 10 bits of our health. So, the ultimate challenge is just basically we need to beat the crap out of them before you're able to actually just, well, run out of your health points. So, but it's not too difficult or anything like that. The only thing that makes it a little bit tricky is, of course, the actual patterns that you need to watch out for, especially when, you know how everything else goes ridiculously fast and you know, the actual fastest speed alive or anything like that, or even the actual guard thing, or I don't know. It's hard to explain about this kind of stuff, folks, because I know for the fact that we're almost there towards the end of this Let's Play, so I'm sure enough we're able to actually, you know, finish this Let's Play and during at some point at the very end of this month in particular, around the same time as, you know, Pac-Man World and all that stuff. So hopefully, relatively speaking, that makes it a little bit obvious. So, but anywho, let's go ahead and ground pound his tongue, and we get ourselves 2 of those pieces of yarn right there. And after we collect all 5 of them in some of the 4 bosses that we actually just managed to kick their butts out of them, you're able to actually reward one of the Yoshis. So either way, like for instance, we got ourselves the first 5 sets if you manage to collect all of them, and this will able to give us the new colored Yoshi, which this time is the forms of Bronze Yoshi. So, now I believe the next Yoshi we might actually unlock is of course the Silver Yoshi, and of course to conclude that, we're able to actually come across into Gold Yoshi, which, either way, it's kind of reminds me of that little particular metal, you know, metal designs and stuff like that. Like, the bronze is basically the 3rd place medal from the Olympics and stuff like that, and vice versa. Then you get, like, 2nd place, you get a silver, and then 1st place, obviously, gold. So, you probably get the idea for that point. So anyways, a few things I want to explain about this, actually, while I'm trying to able to actually beat these boss fights no matter what. Recently, about the fact that some new stuff has been happening ever since during the forms of, well, let's just say today. And by this time and going forth, is the fact that Fortnite is actually getting its new chapter, which is, of course, Chapter 2 of Fortnite. And it's especially noticeable how the fact that, well, despite the fact that most other people out there seem to get really into it, especially noticeable how the fact that they can able to, well, obviously play on the go, on the Switch, or even especially noticeable by simply able to play it all the time on the PlayStation 4 hardware, or even the Xbox One hardware as far as I'm concerned. So, but anywho though, as far as I'm aware from any single stuff out there, recently until tomorrow, specifically 2 PM, specifically in the UK version, that once again Pokemon Sword and Shield were able to actually get ourselves even more news as a result. And speaking of that particular duology of games, as far as I'm aware, they actually revealed the forms of the actual file size if you managed to able to noticing that. Like, I believe it might actually took about 10.3 gigabytes, which is actually a little bit more compared to the forms of how it does it in Super Mario Odyssey, and especially noticeable with a little bit lesser compared to Zelda Breath of the Wild, which it's pretty okay, I suppose, but even then, though, that's what the microSD card comes in. So either way, though, because if you run out of space on any kind of software, as far as I'm aware, mind you, I'm probably not gonna get that game, honestly, because, well, I'm just not a huge Pokemon fanatic, as I said this countless amount of times. I know it's down to my opinion, but I'm sure enough most people seem to have their own opinions as well, so... But either way, though, I might be curious to see how there are some interesting info they might actually bring us to the table, especially when we get to tomorrow and stuff like that. So, but then again, we'll find things out during tomorrow. So either way, especially noticeable whenever I manage to able to, hopefully we might be able to actually go for the last special stage in this entire game, especially with the true final stage in the whole entire game, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, you probably noticed about the fact that every time you die in those boss rematch encounters, well, basically the actual notification shows up, and that was the fact that, well, if you really want to, like, restart the actual challenge, well, or battle with the boss again, then you have to go for this entire boss fight all over again, which, frankly, it doesn't kick you out or anything like that, at least unlike in certain games or anything like that, but either way, though, still, it makes it a little bit slightly tricky and difficult just because of the actual faster movements with the actual bosses themselves, and especially noticeable how the fact that, well, sometimes I will admit, though, trying to learn these little patterns can get really tricky to able to dodge them sometimes, especially with this little dash ability that he constantly uses, so... But the whole entire purpose of this entire boss fight is very similar to the forms of how it does in the first encounter with these bosses, except, well, they move a lot more faster than ever before, so... Yeah, that's as far as I can say about the actual huge differences between the forms of the original encounters, especially noticeable in coordination to the forms of the actual, well, the boss rematch encounters, so... But anyways, though, let's go ahead and duck and jump at the right time, so hopefully we could... not to take any hits whatsoever. I don't know what's the difference between the forms of the classic mode and especially noticeable in mellow mode when it comes to like dealing with these boss rematch encounters, but I'm pretty sure that if you play this on mellow mode or something like that, I believe you get 20 hearts, and I believe in classic mode you might actually stuck with just only 10 hearts, so... Oh, crap. Okay, there we go. Hopefully he'll be down in just any moment, and booyah! There we go. Even though it only took me about 2 attempts on that particular boss fight though, but then again, when we get to boss 4 and onwards though, it just makes things a hell of a lot more difficult, especially because, you know, with the actual faster movements or anything like that, just actually throws you off a bit, especially because if you keep on getting used to with the forms of the actual game itself, so that way you're gonna have to able to actually pay attention to that kind of stuff whatsoever, so... Alright, so I believe we're almost done with the forms of the silver particular patches of yarn and stuff like that before we move on to the last 4 boss rematches, which is specifically for the golden Yoshi. So it doesn't take that long though until you're able to memorize anything, especially noticeable with the actual attack patterns or anything like that, mainly with the forms of World 4 and onwards. Well, to be more specifically, the World 4 normal boss fight, and oh wow, I just simply managed to get touched by the forms of the actual waves themselves, so that's a little bit terrific for my part, but at least we can able to actually deal with him just as fine, so... And the only good thing about this though is the fact that if you're almost running out of your beads selection, or in this case the actual bead collecting so far, you can able to actually like, you know, farm those beads again, so either way though, that way it might be a good way for able to actually giving you a whole bunch of beads if you're having a hard time with difficult levels, if you really want to go for every single collectible, if you really want to unlock the last true final stage in the whole game, well, you're probably guaranteed by that specific solution here, so... Anyways, that's I think we're actually on the, I would say in the halfway point at this though. Well, I haven't really paid that much attention though, so either way, let's move on to Novel Piranha, so... Oh boy, it's where things gets a little bit more tricky and difficult at this point right now. Alright, quick go right there if you couldn't tell right there, because holy crap, this is what the boss fights, as I said before, gets a lot more difficult, and especially noticeable how the fact that with, not for Piranha, you know, Nufa Piranha, for instance, that's, you know, the actual movements is so ridiculously fast, I'm not gonna lie. And especially noticeable how the fact that his attack pattern can get a little bit, you know, stingy as far as I'm aware. But obviously the main objective here is the fact that we need to toss the bombs right into its mouth. I had a hard time on the forms of the second phase whenever I managed to able to first time fight against with him on the actual boss tent mode. But every once in a while though, at least if you know what you're doing, you will be alright. But it's just that, well, it just gets a little bit more tricky and difficult as it proceeds. And don't worry, at this point in time, folks, is the fact that I'm going to be doing a multitude of jump cuts whenever I do a successful attempt, rather than just like, you know, keep on failing all the time, because, well, you just don't want to sit through with the forms of failure attempts or anything like that, because, well, that'll be no fun, especially because if you really want to see what's the actual proper best experience of so many bosses, run-throughs and all that stuff, well, I think this boss in particular might actually took me about, I would say, 8 attempts as far as I'm aware, because the first 7 attempts I simply managed to able to fail most of the time throughout. So, but at least we managed to accomplish the forms of the silver pieces of yarn. So even then, after we go through all that, we got ourselves the silver Yoshi, so I think we can able to switch over somehow, because after all, we've already shown off, you know, the bronze Yoshi, so I think now it's about time for able to, you know, switch over to the forms of the silver Yoshi to see how he looks like in action. So hopefully that'll be the case though, and I think we're almost nearly towards the end of the boss tent. So either way, now after we're done with the boss tent, however though, we can just simply move on to the forms of, well, the true final stage in the whole game. Especially noticeable, it doesn't really matter what version you're going to be playing through, specifically the 3DS version or the Wii U version specifically. But either way though, let's go ahead and take him on the forms of the next boss, you know, the rematch as far as I'm aware. And that is the final time we're going to be seeing this boss, because either way, after we're done with him though, we're probably not going to see him ever again, because until, you know, Yoshi's Crafted World, I don't think we can able to see these returning boss fights again. Well, some exceptions, but even then, we'll point things out during the forms of next year or something, so. But either way though, it really depending on the forms of time and everything. So either way, let's just go ahead and, wow, Jesus Christ, man, chill out, man. Especially because of how the fact that, oh, shoot. Oh well, whatever. At least I can able to retry for that specific point right there. So, especially because how the fact that this entire boss fight is usually always gonna take place in the well, the ice physics based. So, hopefully though we can able to ground pound him from here, and you know, things can get a little bit more sporadic and all that stuff. Oh yeah, I forgot to able to actually show off some occasional. Oh wait, I don't suppose I can able to actually show off the rest of the power badges at this point, because, well, at this point in time, we're almost pretty much low when it comes to the forms of the actual power beats itself, but I just want to able to mention about that, enjoying at some point or another, until whenever we get to the Baby Bowser boss fight, in this case, one of the hardest boss fights in this entire mode, which I'll say that right now, because, well, you know how it is, because basically it just gets a lot more tougher later on, though, especially when we now onto, you know, the golden parts, as far as I'm aware, for the actual pieces of yarn that we need to grab. So either way though, we'll point things out with the actual difficulty might actually increase and all that stuff. But you know, this particular boss fight might actually took me about two tries. So, and speaking of such, let's move on to Sniffberg, the, well, I would say the forms of the unfeeling, as far as I'm aware. So let's just get this boss started. Hopefully this boss fight won't be nearly as hard as Novel Piranha, that's for circumstances. Alright, another jump cut for this point right there, because similar to the forms of Novel Piranha, it actually took me a lot of tries to able to actually deal with this in the right time, because what makes this boss fight a lot more trickier than the forms of the first time around is, of course, the actual movements, and second, you know what this attack right here, specifically, that's kind of like how he did on Dalton Stage Mario Mix minigame, where you basically have to avoid a lot of those avalanche snowballs and everything like that. I swear to God, these are entirely impossible to able to avoid these things while you're trying to able to go for that specific death in mind. But what makes this a little bit trickier compared to the rest of the actual boss rematch encounters is that obviously this is entirely ice physics. So As a result of this kind of stuff, though, you might as well able to actually get hit a lot in this entire battle. But hopefully, though, we can able to actually bypass that no matter what it will be. So, hopefully that could be a little bit more relative, but except for this particular phase. Because, well, I swear to God, it's so unfair to able to actually dodge that sometimes. But anyways, now let's move on to the actual final phase, obviously. So either way, though, rarely do I ever just seem to able to actually always run into those shy guys super easily whenever I manage to try to able to create some of these balls of yarn, as you can see right there. Well, not necessarily true though, but anyway, I'm really sorry for the actual commentary for this point, folks, even with the actual post commentary, because again, there's not much else I can really talk about this, because either way, that we're actually getting very close towards the end of this Let's Play at this point right now, especially that we can able to move on to Yoshi's Crafted Worlds at some point next year, as I said this before. So now we're going to be moving on to the last two bosses. So here we go with round number 3 for not Wing To Koopa. This will be the final time we're going to be seeing him in this entire Let's Play of Yoshi's Woolly World somehow. So even then though, that's definitely a lot more difficult than he forms of how it does on the first 2 encounters with him, so... Because, you know, he has like a build blaster and stuff like that, and also he moves super duper fast. And also if you accidentally fell down to the bottomless pit, that also counts as a death, by the way. So either way though, you need to be able to be very cautious with that specific stuff. So, especially noticeable, you really can't afford to able to hit too many of those bullet bills, or even get hit by a multitude of bullet bills, if you can tell. So yeah, relatively a lot more trickier than he forms of how it does on the, you know, the first time around on 6-4, so... But, you know, you probably get the idea for that. So anyways, let's go ahead and... I seriously swear to God, these bullet bills over, like, you know, move incredibly fast in an attempt to... Oh crap, yeah, I just died. Holy crap, man, this... It's too much. It's too much speed, I'm telling you. I get it for the actual challenge and everything like that, but when it comes to bosses like this, especially noticeable in the actual final boss, again, I think this one gets a little bit tricky and too much, which I'll point things out whenever we're able to get to it though, but you'll never know. You will never know. But anyways though, so let's go ahead and just eat up the actual red homing bullet bill as far as we can able to create the actual balls of yarn, as you can see right there. I'm probably not going to recommend you able to actually go for the aiming mode, because I think aiming with your shots with the actual woolly ball might actually take you quite a while to able to actually do all that kinds of stuff, because, well, you simply have not much time to react to it. So, especially noticeable how the fact that it doesn't help about the fact that, well, since the actual boss fights can move ridiculously fast and stuff, but there we go, we managed to able to kick the likes of not Wing the Koopa's butt, and we're able to actually never go see him again, because, well, after that though, I think we're now going to be moving on to the final boss rematch incarnation, which is of course Baby Bowser. So, I'm afraid it's safe to say that this one might actually be one of the toughest of the actual 12 bosses, because, well, you'll probably want to point things out whenever we're able to jump right in. So, of course, if you're having a hard time with the actual boss 10 itself, good thing to you, there is actually a, you know, the multiplayer aspect if you're having a hard time with the actual bosses themselves. So, anyway, let's go to the final boss again. Alright, so if you couldn't tell right here, quite a lot of jump cuts, because, well, if you couldn't tell, as I said this before, this is easily, without doubt, the hardest boss rematch incarnations at this point, because, for one thing, he jumps all over the place, and second, that you never how the fact that I mentioned this before already, is the fact that you start the actual boss fights themselves with only 10 units of health. So this means you really can't afford to able to actually get hit multitude of times, especially because you know how very unpredictable Bowser Jr. can be, or in this case Baby Bowser, because I keep on thinking of the main Mario games for some reason, because of the actual voice might be slightly similar to the forms of how it does on Bowser Jr. from other games, but usually he jumps a lot all over the place, if you couldn't tell. Now I really recommend you're not supposed to able to actually just create yourselves a ball of yarn and just trying to able to aim it at Baby Bowser, because I highly recommend you able to eat up the enemy, not gobble it by the way, and create the forms of the actual woolly ball. Instead, we need to able to keep itself and then just trying to, hopefully God forbid, trying to able to aim at Baby Bowser as much as you could. But Usually I found the actual third phase is somewhat really unpredictable because most of your time you're going to be able to dodge a lot of lava. So either way, that takes care of him. But if you think we're actually done with him though, well, turns out much like the main game, well, we need to deal with the true final boss instead. So, and I believe no matter what though, if you get screwed over by this particular boss fight rematch, I'm afraid it seems to say there won't be any checkpoints or anything like that. So you have to go for this within one single run through. So, relatively speaking, this is without doubt the hardest boss rematch incarnations of this entire game. So, yeah, because no matter what though, if you manage to get hit multitude of times or anything like that, well, you never know if you're able to actually do this in a perfect run. So, and it doesn't help about the fact that, again, as I mentioned this before, this boss fight can get pretty stingy on checkpoints, especially because that if you get screwed over, if you get screwed over at least once, well, if you somehow manage to die by the forms of this boss fight, or in this case in any phases for that matter, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the actual boss fight, but will simply face off against with, well, the first phase of Baby Bowser. So, yeah, definitely a lot more difficult than the forms of how it does on the first time we actually face off against with him on the actual World 6 world. But still, it is definitely one of the toughest, so... yeah, because I'm up for a challenge though, don't get me wrong, but either way though, that's as far as I can usually think about that for the time, so... okay, he's almost down, so he's got about 4 more pieces of yarn left, so hopefully we're able to actually get this guy down. So, and hopefully we can able to actually pretty much done with the forms of the boss tent, and then, we can simply just move on to the final final special stage / the final stage in the whole entire game. And then we can able to show off some extra bits, like, for instance, the amiibo functionality of this game, and especially noticeable with the forms of some other side modes or anything like that, and, all the other stuff. So, I'm quite surprised about the fact that we didn't get a single delay of this Let's Play. Well, the only time we did manage to go a delay from is, of course, we did start this off since February this year, and then we actually just managed to come back into it at some point about 5 months later, because, well, we just want to get some of these occasional Let's Plays done and over with before we move on to the next. So, and there we go, that takes care of Baby Bowser, and I believe for that particular jump cut run-throughs of this particular boss, I think it actually took me about 11 attempts, because the first part can really go to hell, because, well, I actually don't mind the actual second phase, even for the giant Baby Bowser phase, because, well, I found it's a little bit slightly easy, but the only time you need to avoid the actual attacks themselves is, of course, the actual lava, and especially noticeable with the giant balls of yarn. So, and there we go. Once we're done with all these 12 boss rematch incarnations, it's that, well, you were able to unlock the 65th Yoshi, which is essentially the Gold Yoshi. So, I think we actually got about 1 more Yoshi left by going through all 66 of them. So, but that'll be the forms of the final stage in the whole game. So even then, we'll switch out to the forms of Silver Yoshi to Gold Yoshi, and look how rich I am. But either way though, that doesn't usually stop there, however though, because then again, we're able to actually tackle through the final stage in the whole entire game until, at some point this first day. So either way, yeah, I guess we'll end things off here. So join me next time on Let's Play Yoshi's Woolly World / Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World for the 3DS, is that we're able to actually tackle through the final stage in the whole entire game, plus showing off some extra bits and bobs, specifically for amiibos and all that stuff, and I think that's as far as we can show off when it comes to the forms of the next video coming up. So, yeah, it should be exciting overall, so even then, see you guys next time for that. Later, fellas.